I've photographed in a lot of factories over the years, and I've done a lot of construction projects of industrial spaces being made. And I recognised, I think, something of the pitfalls, the trials and tribulations of trying to photograph something which is often very spectacular and producing, in the end, some sort of two-dimensional representation of that, which doesn't really get to the heart of the real thing. So. Well, my first impressions of Bombardier were slightly disappointed, actually. I made the mistake of starting off by going to the National Railway Museum in York and looking at their archive of photographs. It was a time when the site was much bigger than it is now, and they had smelting works on. You know, they made everything from scratch. So it was an incredibly spectacular space. As I remember, they're making approximately one train every day, but they're making lots at the same time. So the production line is quite slow and it's quite understated. It's not, by any stretch of the imagination, what you'd call spectacular. I think it's more challenging to try to make interesting work in a place which doesn't bang you over the head with its visual interest straight away. You know, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know how to make a train. I don't know how to make a car, you know, or dye some yarn. I suppose that's also part of that unwillingness that I felt to try to reveal what it was like or what was actually happening here, because actually I don't understand it, and far be it from me to be able to sort of present this definitive idea of this is how you make a train and this is what it looks like, because I can't. And it is that relationship between man or woman and work and man and materials and the danger involved. I think it's the way that often humans are consumed by the industry that's around them as well. You know, when they're making these things, that they're sort of dwarfed by these things. One of my reference points was Lee Friedlander's work that he made in America in the 60s, 70s, around sometimes very major American industrial sites. His work was very much about that sort of consumption of the human presence by the machines. You know, they'd almost morphed into one. There's something about Friedlander's pictures which often look quite dangerous, you know, and it's not quite the same as that in a place like Bombardier. It doesn't feel quite the same, but nevertheless the people do seem to be dwarfed by the scale of the production. I mean, it's objective because the pictures are clear and sharp, and you know they can be looked at by certain people and understood. There is a very distinct aesthetic to these pictures which I've strived to create, which it sort of paints all of these different industries that I've been visiting with the same brush, so they're almost interchangeable. And so that is hugely subjective. But I'd never been in a factory that, you know, weaved material before, and I think, you know, Murray was the same. I think we were both sort of quite knocked out by this process that was, you know, very antiquated in some ways. You know, it was the traditional process, and yet it was still something remarkable to see. It was great because there was like this symbiosis between Murray and myself, that we both saw this thing at the same time, and he had the flash gun in his hand, I had the camera, and it was literally like a second, and we both worked together to make that picture work. It was great. It was really good when that happens, actually. So you become part of a team, and Murray is really very much a part of making this work. I know they look like Caravaggio pictures a little bit. I'm not trying to create a Caravaggio in a car factory. I mean, but of course, you know, it is an aesthetic that we recognise, and it's not unusual in photography either. But it is an aesthetic that people I can see could readily think that looks quite painterly. That's, you know, because the world doesn't look like that. You can explain to people what you're trying to do, and essentially we're trying to sort of highlight the fact that there are still things being made in Britain. But I think people quite often have a blinkered view of what photography is, and they will have seen other industrial photographers come to their site and make other types of pictures. So you know, there'll be something there which makes them look at what they do in a different way. But that's, you know, that's bordering on me being very pretentious, and I don't want to be that. You know, all photography is autobiographical because you have to be there to press the button, and because I recognise that photography does not represent the real world. And, you know, when I sent the pictures to Leah, who was looking after us at Bombardier, first thing she said was, "I didn't realise that Bombardier looked so sexy." So, it is that reinvention of something, a space, which to them, I assume, has become very sort of ordinary and everyday, and suddenly somebody comes along and shows it in a completely different way.